we speak more about the advantages and limitations, right? So as you rightly pointed out, few of the limitations like cold start. Again, AWS is doing as far as AWS is concerned, right? So they are doing a lot of uh, work around this to make sure that the cold start and the time gets reduced. Recently, I think in the last reInvent, like last
Yeah,
month itself, they have launched the Snap Start, if I'm not wrong, right?
correct,
So
correct.
yeah, I think even we tried in one of the projects, and that has given a kind of a very bright results, because that is not only saving a lot of milliseconds for each request, but also saving a cost in turn, right? Because the lambda time is directly proportional to the cost. So
Yeah,
this kind of one of the limitation they have recently reduced. But again, there are some more. Why don't you speak about them?
yeah, yes. Yeah, so advantages we have seen till now. So when we come to the limitations, yes, Praveen was mentioning, yes, cold start is one thing. As I was telling, it is just like serverless is whenever the process is running, it is active, and whenever the process is not ready, it goes in sleep mode actually. And again, when suppose when any request it has, when any request it has to process, new request it has to process, again it will bootstrap. It's so bootstrapping in such a way, again it will start its complete process. It will load the program in its memory and start execution. So loading the program in memory and starting the execution will take some time. That is what we call bootstrapping actually. So that because of that bootstrapping, the time taken for bootstrapping is nothing but the cold start. And as Praveen was mentioning earlier, like recently, last month, Lambda AWS actually is doing some bringing some enhancements in Lambda. That too with the Java runtime as of now, not with other runtimes. With the Java runtime, so it is doing like kind of. So whenever Lambda is running, it will preserve the snapshot in some persistent store, and it will use that persistent store in the next bootstrap. It will not again bootstrap. It will take that snapshot and again start its function. And that snapshot will be preserved for 14 days. After 14 days, that will get deleted. So that is what actually that too they have just put for that too they have put for Java runtime.
Yeah,
And
I think even they
similarly,
have similar thing called concurrent. I think concurrency, right? I mean, concurrent execution. They are also having,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
even but that is again costly a bit.
Yeah. That is actually provisioned is there where
Concurrency, yeah,
actually yeah provisioned is there during the concurrency, but that is very costly.
yeah,
So that is charged for unnecessarily for that will not actually again suffice for the serverless. When we go for provision means again it becomes a managed.
yeah.
So it is as if that will not actually suffice the actual serverless definition.
Exactly. And even
Uh,
the Snap Start, what they have launched recently, I think the enhancement they did, right? Even that has a limitation in terms of the if you're having any network drive, right? The NFS or something, any file system, so it will not support that. So that is one
correct.
of the
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
disadvantages we face
correct.
here.
Yeah, correct. And then yeah, one of the another limitation of serverless is multi-tenancy. Like
Yeah.
when we say multi-tenancy, especially now, very suppose it's a few competitor businesses, so they will be using serverless, and because serverless is completely managed by the cloud provider, so and definitely the competitor applications, two competitors, for example, let us take, and they deploy in the serverless. So it is not guaranteed that they will be running in dedicated infrastructure because it is completely managed by cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be a possibility that the scaling, the high availability of both competitor services are managed by the same cloud provider. And it will be a concern like the data also might be shared, but definitely the cloud providers have a lot of restrictions in sharing the data and anything. But since it's actually shared model, serverless, definitely the competitors will face a stiff competition, like in terms of scalability, in terms of security. That is one of the limitation. But again, it is a cloud provider who has a strong isolation in terms of security and all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, from the business perspective, this might be a kind of limitation. And vendor lock-in, as I was telling in the earlier slide, like
Yeah, that is one.
now as actually serverless code that we write has actually tight integration with vendor logging. But how we can, there is a limitation. I mean, there's a mitigation to reduce this limitation. Like we have to follow proper coding standards and architectural best practices. So for example, I'll take a simple scenario. Whenever we integrate Lambda with Spring Boot. So Spring Boot, we are writing one RESTful web service or REST API. So what we do is we combine the code. We combine the code with the Lambda related functions and the business logic. And that gets tightly coupled. So we need to write proper design patterns to loosely couple the Lambda code with the business logic, so that the business logic can be separately tested and it can be deployed to any environment, any service, so that the Lambda handler may not be combined with the business logic. So we can write proper adapters. Yeah. Similarly, execution time limitations, I was telling you, it is not for all serverless services, especially for event-driven mechanisms like Lambda, those kind of things. But still, like Fargate and all, there is no execution time. And another limitation is there is no access to underlying infrastructure in serverless. Like suppose if you get any kind of infrastructure issue or anything, we cannot actually debug at the server level, just like how we debug at virtual machine level or EC2 instance level at the infrastructure as service. Like that, we cannot debug with the serverless. So that is troubleshooting becomes issue. Again, we need to raise a support ticket to cloud provider and get these issues up. So these are some kind of limitations. Yeah. And the specific advantage in healthcare are these things like, as we were discussing, like especially unpredictable fluctuation of workloads, healthcare serverless is being used, similar to IoT data processing and HIPAA compliant services. There are many serverless related assessment part which are managed at the cloud level.
Yeah. I think another one of the limitation, or maybe like you can tell more on that. So when it comes to microservices, right? So thinking about Kubernetes or whatnot, so we can easily have inter-microservice communication, right? Through Istio or any other service thing, service gateway. But what about the Lambda? Or let's say taking example of AWS Lambda again, right? So how exactly you are looking at calling one Lambda from another? Is that like happens over the same private network, or it is how exactly it works behind the scenes?
Yeah. So whenever actually, yeah, that's what. Whenever calling one. So your question, if I understand correctly, so calling one Lambda with another Lambda, right?
Yeah. So is that like kind of you're expecting some kind of a latency in that, because these are Lambdas are actually not tightly coupled with each other, right? They are running in isolation. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's what. So here Lambda, yeah, especially in the same network, for example. So network will not have any latency. It is only the whenever the request that is coming to Lambda. So that will first time it will incur the cold start latency, and rather than and once it process actually it will be fast. And similarly, especially many people will tell that the Node.js and Python they are very faster in Lambdas rather than Java and C# code. Yeah, actually Java and C#, I mean, mainly they will be having latency in the first time start, like cold start, but once they're running, actually they are more faster when compared to Node.js.
Node.js, yeah.